everyone, my name is Pandayu Saptiari. I would like to present about words and cultures. So when we talk about words and cultures, there is a hypothesis that put forward by Edward Sapir and also his students Benjamin Lee Wolf. So they state that different languages represent different way of thinking. And they have two hypotheses. There are linguistic relativity, which is the weak version, and linguistic determinism, which is the strong version. In linguistic relativity, this states that the structure of the language influences how the people think about the world. For example, in Indonesia, there are words padi, beras, and nasi. But in Western, they call them in one word. It is rice. So it's influenced by the language and the cultures that they have. The other example of linguistic relativity will be shown in this video.
Good morning, everyone. Please take your seats. What are you all doing? We are taking our seats, sir.
Starts 31st March.
Well, on that video, we heard that the teacher said, take a seat. But the students do a wrong interpretation because it's influenced by their language and cultures which have different structures from each language. So the exact meaning of take a seat is sit down, or in Indonesian it means duduk. But the students on that video translate directly the place into their word, into their language, so they got the different meaning of that phrase. So therefore, when we learn about another language, we have to learn both the language and also the cultures because each language have different structures. So we cannot directly translate the other language word to our language because we will got different meaning. Then I will explain about linguistic determinism. In linguistic determinism, Sapir and Wolf state that the background of the linguistic system or the grammar of each language determine people's thought in formulating idea in experiencing the world. For example, Hopi people and European people, they have different structure and they have different grammar of their language. In European people, they have a certain structure for telling the concept of time. For example, when they talk about past, present, and future, they have different structure, but Hopi people doesn't have this concept. So European people, when they talk about present, the sentence will be I study. So it means they talk about present. What are done in present? What are happen in the present? But when they talk about past, it will be I studied. It means that it happened in the past. But when they talk about future, the sentence will also change. It will be I will study. So European people have different structure for telling the period of time. So what happened in that time, in the past, and also in the future, they have its own structure. But Hopi people doesn't have this concept. And after we talk about the theory of Sapir and Wolf, we will talk about kinship. Kinship is a terminology of relatives. It's used to identify the relationship between individuals in a family. So they call the relative based on blood, marriages, and also their interaction in organization. For example, father's father and mother's father we call grandfather, and mother's son we call brother, and father's brother we call uncle. So we have different name for our relatives, so we call in different way. In relate the word and cultures in terms of kinship. Each country has different way to call their relative. For example, in Indonesia, we call the older person with kakak. But in Western or in America, it doesn't mind if we just call their name. Indonesian people maybe think that Western people is not polite, but it's actually not like that because we have different cultures and we have different way of in calling our family. So it's influenced by their cultures and what we usually done to with our relative. After we talk about kinship, we will talk about taxonomies. Taxonomies is a way of classifying a certain part around us. It's commonly used it's commonly found in flora and fauna. For example, Solomon Island classify birds and bats in a same class. But in Indonesia, we don't put them in the same class. Birds are poultry and bats are mammals. So we have different way of classifying a certain part around us. It is because of our cultures and our language. Then we will talk about color. So every language see the color in different way and they have different name of basic colors. When we talk about colors, each language have the basic colors like red, black, white, etc. We call the color in one word, not like the combination of color. Berlin and Kay state there are interesting pattern of each color that have by the language. When the language have two term of color, it will be black and white. If the language have three terms of color, it will be black, white, and red. Then when the language have 4 and 5 terms of color, it will be black, white, red, yellow, and green. Then when they have 6 and 7 terms of color, it will be black, white, red, yellow, green, blue, and brown. So each language have different basic colors and different way to see the colors in the spectrum of color. Then when we relate the words and cultures in terms of color, each language also have different meaning for the color. For example, in Indonesia, red means braveness, but in China it means happiness and celebration. Then the color white, it means pureness in Indonesia, but it means unhappiness in India. So each language or each culture also have different way in meaning the color. Then still in terms of color, certain culture also have certain color. For example, in Western cultures there is blonde. So this color used for hair color. In Indonesia, we also have certain color for describing the color of skin. It is kuning langsa. So in terms of color, we have different name of the color and also we have certain color and we also see the color in different way. Then we will talk about prototypes. So prototypes are categories the words which are similar and considered as typical instances, and it is the typical instance of a concept. Some of the concepts are more central in their certain categories than others. For example, furniture. Furniture is a concept. Then Table and chair is the typical items of furniture, but ashtray is not. Then we talk about fruit. Orange and apple is the typical items of fruits, but coconuts are not. The other example of prototypes is when I talk about chocolate. One will think about chocolate bar and the other will think about chocolate milkshake. And then the next example is when I give a concept breakfast. So Western culture will think about cereal, sandwich and pancake, but Indonesian people will think about nasi kuning or bubur ayam. So every people who has different language and cultures will classify, will categorize the part around them in a different concept. Although they have they got the same concept, but they have different thing to put in that concept. Then after we talk about the prototypes, we will talk about the euphemism. So euphemism is a polite expression of speech used to replace the word or phrase that are unpleasant. So it's used to replace the taboo words. So taboo words of one cultures to another's are different. In Western cultures, age, marriage status, and religions are taboo. But in Indonesia, it is not. So the example of taboo words are we will say she passed away instead of she died. And then we will say senior citizen instead of old people. So those examples are the example of euphemism. So it's used to make the people don't feel unpleasant and also hurtful. Okay, I think that's all about the explanation of words and cultures. Thank you.